Okay. What I want to talk about is where we are. And to do that, you have to have a little bit of history. So anybody familiar with Malcolm Gladwell? His books? Okay. So Malcolm Gladwell has multiple wonderful books. One of them is The Tipping Point, which is one of his early books that talks about the momentum of things. And when you get some momentum and you get to a point where you're at a tipping point and you can't go back. So we have fit that in this industry in some regards. And then he has another book called Outliers. And that basically goes back and looks at some really successful companies and tells us that you should examine a successful company, but you should do it from the history of that company. And it is especially true to do that for this industry, because the history of this industry, very recent history, is significantly impacting what we can do with product development and legalization today. Eden Labs is celebrating its 25th year this year in extraction technology, and we have been doing extracting cannabis the entire time, along with a multitude of other botanicals. We brought commercial scale ethanol and CO2 to the industry in 1996. We have seen these developments come, and we saw CBD. Oh, there we go. I'm like, oh. And we saw CBD coming. Thank you. And we saw CBD coming as well. And we thought, okay, well, at the time there was new research from Tikkun Olam out of Israel that said that CBD had a bell curve medically, which kind of limits it to being really called medicine to some degree, because a bell curve means that it's effective, and then it starts to slip off the other side and not be effective. And what they found is that they add in other minor cannabinoids and the terpenes, and then that increases the efficacy and stabilizes, and the more you increase those minor cannabinoids, the more efficacy it increases. So why is there all of this excitement about CBD? Extraction technology, when we started bringing it in, was the catalyst to make this industry grow and grow quickly. Because I realized in 2009 that we were going to have safe methods of extraction in order to have safe products that could be actually absolutely unquestionable to the medical profession, fire departments, everybody. It was essential. We were never going to legalize, or we're going to legalize very, very slowly. So having extraction involved, and I can't tell you the number of organizations I went to in those early years to try and get them to start talking about extraction. And to this day, we still have really big companies coming to us because they've gotten investors and they've gotten millions of dollars and they have acreage and they have product, and they're like, okay, we have this pot. Now what are you going to do with it? It's astounding, because they just don't think about the extraction process. So we have that. There's a whole industry around extraction now. But what is really going to secure this very unstable, politically charged industry? Often, when it comes to product development, and especially with cannabis, what is happening is it's all about how you're getting the extraction. I've spent years on panels talking about extraction with scientists and dudes and and business people. You get the whole gamut, years. And so I'm delighted to get back to not how these extractions are done, but why. Why do them this way? And the reason why we have to ask why is because this entire industry is being driven by politics and not science. And this is your market. And it can change like that. Here in Washington State, the Liquor Control Board, who regulates this industry here, decided last October that candies were no longer going to be legal. And so anybody had inventory had to sell out their inventory, and all had to be off the shelves by April. We're like, why? Why? And you're talking about small businesses that you're supposed to be supporting. It's an industry. So unless you're legislatively active, politically active, and are prepared for these kinds of things with your product line, it could be devastating. The other part of this is we've gone from a cannabis industry to a hemp industry. And that has been, the mechanism of that is because they're starting to define this plant by its molecules, which we have been doing for medical science for quite some time, and it doesn't really work all that well. Thousands and thousands and thousands of years, humans have used cannabis medically. They just recently found a what was it? Would look like a really, really early rosin press, where they had taken cannabis and heated it, and then placed warm rocks on top, which is basically what rosin presses do. But it was the earliest. Now I don't know how many thousands of years ago it is now, but we have used this plant safely and effectively for practically the whole human history. In this country, and up until the 1900s, there were multiple different cannabis companies. And a lot of these companies were pharmaceutical companies today, like Eli Lilly, Park Davis, had multiple different product lines for cannabis. What started the change on that is in 1805, Frederick Wilhelm Serturner separated out the first molecule out of a plant. Anybody tell me what that is? The alkaloid morphine. From there, they made multiple other opiate-derived things for pain and a lot of the things that cannabis was being used for. In about 1852, the hypodermic needle was invented. Cannabis isn't water soluble, so they weren't like, oh, well, it must be better if you can shoot it into yourself. So that also contributed to its demise. And then in the early 1900s, we had Hearst, Rockefeller, and Anslinger, for various reasons, and a bunch of pharmaceutical companies who instilled such unbelievable, successful prohibition on a plant that today, worldwide, it is seen as something dangerous and ugly and is racially charged. And this all happened around the same time as the Mexican-American War. Sadly, human history and humans do not learn from history. We are still in the same boat where we're blaming other cultures who are trying to come into this country for things that aren't necessarily real. And then Nixon scheduled cannabis, and the primary reason why he did that was to create dissonance and destruction to hippies who wouldn't vote for him and people of color, to destroy their communities. It worked really well. Prohibition has destroyed thousands and thousands of lives. And the supplementation of cannabis with opiates has financially, socially, and on a community basis has devastated thousands and thousands and thousands of lives. So we went from taking this flower and taking the one particle out of it to do that. And now we're taking this family from hemp and cannabis, and and it's getting separated as well. This is very dangerous to this industry. Cannabis businesses cannot get banking. They cannot get financing. And they're primarily, but they passed the Farm Bill, right? To be able to create a foundation under the hemp industry. But that isn't working either because the banks can't tell the difference between where CBD came from. So you're talking about using this one molecule to help legalize, but on the same time, it's just causing more confusion and more dissonance. In product development, especially in this industry, you have to be really aware of all of these things that are going on politically. And if you think that you're safe in this industry, you are not. The hemp farmers are now not being able to get banking, and then you have no business structure. I am the chair of the National Cannabis Industry Association, which represents over 2,000 businesses nationwide, and our primary focus is banking. And we go and talk to legislators about this a lot. And their answer is, at this last lobbying event we just did, well, you know, all these problems would go away if you just deschedule. And we're like, yeah, we agree with that. It would be lovely if we could just deschedule, go ahead. So it's good that they're starting to use this word in DC, but they're also using it as a cop-out. Because to a lot of them, they think that CBD derived from hemp is fine because that's federally legal. CBD derived from cannabis is not. So in your product development, it's important to understand the processing methodologies, which I have been talking about for years. But again, what are you trying to get out of that plant and why? This is why. This is the science. The endocannabinoid system was discovered in 1992, which is a blink in the eye of science. Why aren't we legalizing based on this science? This is a system. You don't take one little part of something and throw it into a system and think it's going to work like that. It's not how it works. CBD, THCA, CBG, they all do different things, and the terpene profiles too. Creates an entourage effect, the terpenes and the terpenoids, and how they interact. And a lot of what's happening is, with how CBD is being created and processed, is they're taking bulk oil and they're stripping everything else out till there's only the CBD. There's no terpenes, there's no other minor cannabinoids or nothing. And do you even know where it's even coming from? There's not a whole lot of regulation on that yet. What we should be doing is looking at the chemotypes and growing for the chemotypes of these plants, hemp as well as marijuana. Why we didn't legalize on CBG, which is the mother of all cannabinoids, is a really good question, because the synthesis from CBG creates all the other cannabinoids. And we would be in a much better place. I mean, obviously the reason why we have CBG is because we don't want to get the children high. Meanwhile, they're on 15 different pharmaceutical drugs and they're like completely whacked out. And they're worried about them being a little bit high from THC. It's ridiculous. It's an excuse. CBG occurs early in a harvest. So that's another benefit from CBG too, is because you can harvest it earlier before all those other cannabinoids are formulated. There are other complaints about this, is there's not enough research. And what about clinical trials? And what about the children? And what about dosages? And how are we going to control that? And there is so much anecdotal evidence right now from thousands and thousands of years of human use. And we've had full medical in multiple states in this country since 1996. No problem. There was no regulations on how you could grow it, where you could grow it, how much of it you needed to take. You just did it until now, but with this molecularization of the plant, it's just a way for them to control it. Like, you can have poppies in your yard, but if you extract them, it's a felony. If you try to use that medicine yourself, you will go to prison. So there has to be a way to find the use of all of this anecdotal evidence, and before you have to go through all these clinical trials. They are completely not set up at all to be able to study compounds, multiple compounds at once, and as a system to a system. But that doesn't mean they can't or shouldn't. The dosage argument I find very annoying. They are now realizing that what we have been told by having clinical trials of multiple different pharmaceuticals is that people have genetic predispositions to certain chemicals and toxicity levels. So they're now sitting there thinking, all right, well, each individual needs to be tested per drug to be able to figure out whether it's going to cause addiction, depression, death. They don't know. And yet we have this plant that we've been using for thousands of years, and we don't have any of those problems. The way around this is to find, instead of taking out the strongest piece of it or taking out all the different pieces to be able to effectively place it into particular illnesses, which they already know a lot about, by the way, just grow for it. The genetics are amazing. I don't know if anybody here knows anything about daylilies, for instance. Daylilies really are easy to breed, and you can create your own. Cannabis is just like that. You put plants on one side of the room, on the other side of the room, and they will grow differently. They will create different chemobars. Their whole chemical profiles will be different. Not a lot different, but still. You can grow for particular cannabinoids. And then you would just extract them by their boiling points and the methodology. Just so that we can clarify some things, because I'm sure you're hearing these words around. An isolate, CBD isolate, is a single molecule. There's nothing else there. It's a mechanical process. It's a purification or separation. A distillate is a concentration of an extract, and it separates out cannabinoids from other things in there, like lipids and waxes and things like that. You might hear terms like short path, thin film, white film. A distillation is using heat and vacuum to separate at lower boiling points to protect the plant material. This is primarily how all essential oils are made, is with steam distillation. So all the perfumes, all those things, and this also works with cannabis on the terpene profiles. The two primary ways that these products are being made, because all of the larger companies coming into this now want medical grade products. So it's primarily ethanol and CO2. Both of those are used extensively in the natural products industry, and CO2 is often used as a marketing tool. This will be an odd thing for me to say as an owner of an extraction equipment company. But another problem with this differentiation we're making between hemp and cannabis is you have to have a lot of hemp. You have to have a lot of biomass to be able to make a product, to be able to put in products. So having that banking challenge is a significant hindrance to this. So what we're seeing is a lot of other countries coming here and investing in businesses, and or those extracted materials are coming here. This is a supply chain portion of being able to control your product development. That is important. Massive amounts of biomass also requires really big equipment. That is expensive. And many craft people cannot afford this kind of equipment. So it's dangerous to the cannabis industry for craft cannabis because they can't get the materials that they need the way they want them, because they want them to be high quality and they want to have some control over how this is done. This is the size of equipment eventually that people are going to have. So it'll be huge toll processing places where you're going to be getting your oil, and you're going to not have very much control over what that is. So we used to have microbreweries. We used to have micro business in general, and went from microbreweries to very few companies in the beer industry. And from that, there was a movement to create beer pubs, and actually in the UK in the 1970s, to go back to microbreweries. This is a path that I can see cannabis going down, where currently we have a lot of craft businesses, we have a lot of quality, love, passion involved in the creation of these products. And then because the general public knows almost nothing about what cannabinoids are, or terpenes, or how things are made, they'll buy anything. I mean, oh my God. Carl's Jr. is going to make a CBD burger. Seriously? I mean, it's going to, and everything, and we don't know to what quantity, and it's just, everybody's going to turn around like, well, that's snake oil, that doesn't work. And that's not going to help our legalization process. It's not going to help us get through the remaining stigmatism, and we're truly in prohibition. It's not going to help. There are 3 pathways we can go down to secure your business future. The medical pathway, nutraceutical or phytoceutical, which is plant-based, or recreational, which I hate that word. We're going to use lifestyle. So if there's these 3 different pathways, and there's not just medical CBD, or not just THC, or not just this, then if we have access to the plant as we do at other supplements and in the natural products industry, because cannabis is the plant you want when you're on a deserted island. It's a medicine, it's a food, it can clothe you, it can house you, it can do all of those things. So we have to be really, really, really diligent to make sure that these pathways are open and we can continue to go down them. And we're not limited to one, like a medical pharmaceutical pathway. In 1889, in the Lancet, which is a medical journal, still a well-known medical journal today, a doctor wrote an article about how cannabis treats the withdrawal symptoms of opiates and also treats nausea. 1889. That is how effective that prohibition was. I mean, it's astounding how successful prohibition was in this country. We are still reeling from it. There are still people in prison. They're still telling us how to, and what to make, and when, and where, and what we can do, and whether we can grow it at home or not. We are so far from being able to have a free market with this plant. This is the next huge market, is women and people over 50. These people have, they know a little something. The women make, I think, over 80% of the decisions in the household about food, medical, etc. They want to know what's in there. They want to know where it came from. And people who are over 50 are, a lot of people over 50 are changing from having cocktails in the evening to having cannabis in the evening. And that's what I mean by lifestyle. It's a lifestyle change to go from, taking some kind of super strong caffeinated medicine to having some THCV before you go work out. But do we talk about THCV ever? The endocannabinoid system is the science. How these molecules are derived and how we place them into it is not modern science. This is. This will change our entire medical system. This is preventative medicine. It is not treating particular illnesses after you have them. This system affects metabolism, homeostasis, restfulness, anxiety, sexuality. By the way, there's a fantastic product here in Seattle called the Velvet Swing. I have friends from all over the country who come here to get it. It's for women. It's fabulous. If you haven't been in Seattle to our lifestyle stores yet, you should. There are many wonderful products. And we have a lot of people here in this area who are extremely knowledgeable about the minor cannabinoids and the terpene profiles. Actually, we have a festival every year called the Terp Festival, only one in the world. We have Dr. Ethan Russo, who created the entourage effect, who lives here locally. He educates every year. I am delighted to be one of the judges. I get to try, this last year I tried 45 different concentrates from their terpene profiles and how they affected us. We had to do all of this data. And all of this education, because that's basically what it is really needed. And each of you, if you can, please support whoever in your communities are helping the general public understand this, because that's the basis for your product to land. You are creating this industry. I've had many huge companies come to say, oh, well, we're going to do, we need extraction. Kind of like, all right, well, what products are you going to make? Well, we're not sure yet. We're going to do some surveys from the public and see what they want. And I'm like, they don't know. They don't know what they want. I mean, I'm like, you have to tell them. You have to educate them. You have to bring them in and show them what you have and why you have it. I'm like, you bring in your granny and you're like, Granny tried this and we have it now on our shelf and it's fantastic, and here's her testimonial, and we have her on film. Like, these personal stories and all of this data, I encourage you to keep it from your product lines, because who knows, we might actually one day figure out a way to have an anecdotal preclinical trial process where they might need this information, but you're going to need this information for how you develop your products going forward. So if you're building your brands and your product line and you're doing your product placement well, keeping in mind that the politics are ever changing, the rules and regulations are ever changing, and that you're ready for it and you're aware. Build your brand with integrity and mission, because it is the hardest thing for somebody to compete with you against, is having a really strong, ethically based mission. And if you base it on the medical science and you prepare your products for medical use, you will be far ahead of your competitors. And also look at the social needs around your community and how this is affecting them. And look at social equity and do something about it. This is one of my favorite quotes. Science, it's by Tesla. Science is but a perversion of itself unless it has as its ultimate goal the betterment of humanity. All the rest of it is greedy bullshit. That's it. Anybody have any questions? Yep.
We have a coming around for questions.
Swing, is that what you said?
So it's not a place, it's a thing. The Velvet Swing is a product for women's sexual arousal.
I'll be 70 years old next year.
There are multiple stores in the Seattle area who have it. I can't think of my offhand who exactly has it. But if you just call the store, or you can probably go to the website and they probably have the stores listed. You're welcome. Happy to help. Yeah.
So you said something about CO2 being used as a marketing tool. Usually there's not much of a difference between CO2 and ethanol extraction.
There's a big difference between ethanol and CO2 extraction. And if you want to talk real extraction technology, we have a booth downstairs and our techs are there. But ethanol is basically what they call an exhaustive extraction, and it will pull everything out of that plant material. When you get done, it'll look like hay if you do it at ambient temperature. If you do it cold, it will keep a lot of the terpenes and it won't pull the chlorophyll and whatever. CO2 is extremely tunable between temperatures and pressures, so you can get a whole wide range of different products that you may need to post-process or not. But what we recommend is people put them together for greater efficiencies, because CO2 is a gentler solvent, so the extraction process is generally longer, and the ethanol is very fast. So, but all of the light essential oils and everything come off out of the CO2 early. So what a lot of our clients do is they'll do like a 1 hour, 2 hour run, get this really lovely terp sauce, and then they'll pull the material and put it in ethanol and pull all the rest of the cannabinoids out. Yeah?
I heard you mention a terpene festival.
The Terp Festival.
Oh, terp festival.
The Terp Festival.
Terp festival. When was the last one? When is the next one, if we're interested in going? Is it here in Seattle?
It is here in Seattle. Well, one year we took it to Northern California, but primarily it's here in Seattle.